Welcome to E3 Energy and Efficiency with Emily, Episode 3 Sustainable Kitchens. Today we have Catherine with Balanced Design Studio here with us to tell us a little bit more about how she got started, what she's up to today, and what's in sustainable kitchens. Catherine, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Okay, so Balanced Design Studio and how I got started. I got started actually in a different field entirely. I was IT and marketing and consulting, and we moved to Maine, and we had two little kids, and it was right after the tech boom had burst, and I wanted to be home with the kids.
Yeah.
And we were renovating a property, and with the intent to live in it and then rent out or sell the other two units. And I did all the design and purchasing and sort of project management for that. And my husband was the implementer. And it was a great way to stay home with the kids. And so that's when and in that part of that journey, when you have kids, that's when, prior to that, I was eating gravy fries for breakfast. I didn't think about health at all. And when you're pregnant, that's when you're like, wow, I better pay attention to a lot more stuff. Yeah. And I really did that's the beginning of that journey on health. And it coincided with a journey on building, because we were renovating these properties. And so that was sort of the kickoff to getting into the design field. Cool. And as far as what Balanced Design Studio is up to these days, I am an independent designer working in concert with Steve Constantino and the guys at Performance Building Supply to bring healthy cabinets to Maine.
Yeah, I know that's definitely been something that's been missing kind of in the market is, there's lots of places that you could go and get, cabinetry. And when he, started with Performance Building Supply, and it was like, oh, do you have a line of cabinetries? And he's like, well, no, not yet, or whatever. So I was so excited when you guys kind of started to partner together and bring that, because I'm always looking for a place to send my clients and for a place for them to get educated on, like, what does it mean to build a more sustainable kitchen, or, even as simple as like, what does it mean to get a kitchen that isn't painted with, high VOCs or loaded with formaldehyde? I mean, things that people don't think about. So
it isn't right. No, and that's funny, because that's exactly what Steve's story was. Is I approached him and I said, hey, I'd like to go out on my own, but and I knew him because our children went to the same school. And he said, people have been asking, and I'm delighted that you're asking too, because we'd love to have someone. So it's a good match.
Yeah, it is a fantastic match, and it's for us, being an architect is one thing, being able to design a building, and then for me, on top of that, keeping up with whatever is new in building science, and then on top of that, keeping up with whatever is new in products, and
yes,
you can get. It's just, it can be overwhelming. So then, we have a client, and they're like, well, where can I see a triple pane window, or where can I go and look at cabinetry? I know when I first moved to Maine back in 2007, I was working on a LEED project, and they had, I don't remember if it was corn husk or wheat based center of the doors, and I don't remember where they were coming from, but it was sort of maybe just in that beginning part where people were starting to think about what cabinetry was made of.
Yes.
So incredibly expensive just to get it.
Yes. Yes.
Let alone where to look or what, might be into it. So
right. You get in through the process and find out the expense, and it's like, ugh.
You're like, I want to do as good as I can, but,
And especially where that's just, the case in a number of products, it all adds up too.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to say that that's not the story anymore. And I think it makes sense that it's the story when, you're in that early adopter phase.
Sure.
But as that Sherwin-Williams makes a no VOC paint that you can use in cabinetry. It's scary for cabinet companies to use because it is not the same manufacturing process. It's very different. Mm-hmm. But if you own the company and you are minded in that way and want to bring that to the world, it's not like you have to invent the wheel. And that's huge. It makes it a venture that's feasible.
Yeah, that's great. So what are you seeing more recently in trends in sustainable cabinetry?
Well, the big news in that's really great news is that the cabinet carcasses, and this has been over a decade long of environmental legislation in the works. Obama signed in 2010 major regulation to reduce formaldehyde emissions, UF emissions. And of course, you can't do that overnight. And so it actually took effect last month, March of 2019, 2019, where now, regardless of whether it's made in the US or whether it's made anywhere, if it's brought into the US, the level of emissions has to be radically lower than what it has been. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
But anyone who has teenagers knows that you can have all the regulations you want, but unless you're prepared to watch all the time, there's going to be some level of infractions of that. And Lumber Liquidators is a good example of that. I'm not sure so I don't want to just throw that around, but in 2015, Lumber Liquidators it was discovered that they were selling laminate flooring and saying it was CARB 2 compliant, and it was 20 times the level of CARB 2 levels. And they just settled, I think last year, for $33 million in fines and settlement costs, and then millions of dollars on top of that. So I'm delighted we have regulation and wouldn't want to be without it, but it should not be construed as a fail-safe,
Yeah.
because unless you're watching constantly, you don't. And when it's chemicals, it's easier to check. You can do the statistical significance test to know how big the sample has to be, and you can really check. And so that's why Lumber Liquidators got caught. If you're talking about something more philosophical like fair trade, and I know that's not in carcasses, but if you're talking about FSC certified for that matter, where it's, the wood that comes through doesn't look any different, you can't chemically test it to say, then some level of fraud is there. And the scary part is you have no idea how much. Because if you knew, you would have caught it in the first place.
Yeah.
So, so the story is a good story with cabinet carcasses, and I hope that the story is going to be equally great with cabinet coatings. To have healthy coatings. But as I say, unless the marketplace starts really demanding that, I'm constantly scouring the market for new brands to carry that offer healthy coatings, and there aren't many.
Yeah.
But we did bring in a new line. So, I mean, it's not new to the industry, but new for performance building supplies. We have a new line coming in from Massachusetts that is one I'm hugely happy to have in, because it's small. I know the guy who owns the company. I know his mentality and what he wants. He's sincere. We're doing this to bring this to the world. And this, of course he has to eat, but it's a great line, and it's local. I mean, it's close.
Well, I know that's part of the challenge in green building too, is that sometimes, when we look at it and the fact that you still can't get an equivalent triple pane window that's made in the United States. I mean, they're doing so much, and they're pushing the envelope, and even some local places here in Maine are really trying hard to kind of meet that. But when you have to think about it, you're like, it's got to be on a boat for 8 weeks, or okay, well, this is a far superior product and we really should use it, but what is the emissions that's in part of it? So I love the fact that you have something that's coming from Massachusetts, something from the Northeast, thinking about, what's produced in the Northeast and using local materials and coatings, for us is so incredibly important, because we're working on, high performance homes. So we're working on, not just what's in your material, but the fact that your house is a lot tighter. And so all those things are just really compounded within a structure, because it's like, oh, well, that low VOC paint, wasn't maybe as big of an issue, for the high VOCs back when we didn't have a stitch of insulation, and, the wind just kind of blew through the house and everybody had foundations. But we're getting to the point where, A, we can't afford to live in those, and why would you want to be uncomfortable all the time? And B, the tighter we build, the more we have to think about then every single thing that you put inside the structure. So
absolutely right. And it really is, it's hard because of course it's invisible, and so it's not intuitive to the human brain to, hey, it's invisible, it's not. And I had a client ask me about that just recently. She's building a very, very tight home, and was asking about, I think she was asking about ventilation, and said something about, my architect said I have to have this air exchanger, and I'm not really sure I understand why, but I don't think we have to worry about, we were talking about the hood, and and having to be cautious about whether it's really doing a heavy hitting job. And she said, I didn't really understand that. And I said, well, I'm going to give it to you in goofy terms. I'm sure your architect's given it to you in really good terms, but goofy terms are you're going to live in a hermetically sealed Uber box. And imagine if you have this thing and all of a sudden you turn on a high powered fan, and more to the point. So that's the ventilation aspect. But now think about the furnishings that you're bringing in, flame retardants on your sofas and formaldehyde and these boxes. And I can tell the difference in our cabinet lines, ones that come in, because we do carry conventional brands too, just in case that's what people need, or elements of it we can pull in. One factory I can go through and I need a mask, and another factory I can walk through the entire plant and not know the difference.
Yeah.
And it's huge. It's huge. So you're bringing that into a place that no air is moving naturally, not like, my original first house where you had to shovel the door from the inside when it snowed.
Right.
And it's huge. It's really important. And I talked to, I don't think nowadays we can find people who don't have anyone that they know that has some mysterious health issue,
right.
Whether it's my daughter has a gluten allergy, and I remember not having any idea what a gluten allergy was, and deadly allergies to peanuts. And I have a client who found out magically that she has lupus, not in her family at all. It's an autoimmune disease. My nephew, same thing, some stomach ailment. So are we seeing this because there's all sorts of, artificial stuff in our lives that wasn't there a long time ago? And when you build tighter and tighter homes, you've got to be thinking about that.
Right. Right. I mean, everything, thinking about the tighter homes, the air quality within your homes, all that stuff, and, plastic and the plastic in the ocean, and what are we drinking? And I mean, it just is
right.
exponential when you start thinking about it and talking about it, and overwhelming all these things that, I grew up a farm kid. We didn't introduce a lot of that stuff into our, we went to the grocery store, obviously, and bought, some things, but a lot of the stuff we grew in our own garden. We didn't put pesticides on it or whatever. And I didn't know I grew up farm to table, and now that's like a thing. It's a buzzword.
Yes.
Farm to table, and it's like, but that's what we used to do. That's how we used to do. And now we've introduced all of these other things into our lives, things that have made it easier, but have been so much worse for you. So
yeah. And takes decades to figure out what the implications are.
Right.
So we're all lab rats.
Right.
I'd like to reduce that.
Exactly. And that's the same, where building science got such a bad rap for a long time, because we tried something and it didn't work. We made these buildings tighter because we're like, okay, if we don't, we're not breezy, but then we didn't do any kind of indoor air quality. And then they had sick buildings and sick individuals. And, we still had a lot of fossil fuels for how we heated our spaces and stuff. And so you have all these other contaminants in, what you have. And so, it's always interesting every time a new technology comes out, how long it takes you. I had, for a long time, I did energy audits, and I had a gentleman who was coming in and he was removing asbestos from old houses. And he's like, 30 years ago, I put all this asbestos in. He's like, and now I'm taking it all back out.
Right.
Oh, man. Right?
Right.
So.
Right. Ooh, with some spacesuit that he
exactly ventilation and all kinds of crazy. So
man. And along that line, the thing, when I wrote that article in the latest issue for Green and Healthy Homes, with this legislation that came out that said let's have lower emissions, that's great, but the big question is, okay, so what are we going to use instead? To your point about we put it in, so it takes a long time to learn what you're replacing it with, and is what you're replacing asbestos with worse than asbestos or just as bad?
Exactly.
And what we're using now is four different alternatives, and I don't know, would be really interesting to know is what the proportions are, but modified you have phenolics, phenol formaldehyde, and I think it's called MDI. It's a substance that quickly I looked at that and said, yeah, no. But Pure Bond is really interesting. It's a great, I'm sure in the vetting process of writing that article, there are some things that you would want to know about it, but it's a plywood made using biomimicry. And I'm so excited by, scientific solutions that looks to nature and said, hey, that doesn't seem to be messing up the planet. Mussels adhere to wet rocks naturally. That doesn't seem to be destroying the planet. So maybe if we can mimic that,
right,
could not destroy the planet. And that is Pure Bond's story, is he looked at mussel shells and whatnot. So looking for cabinets that use Pure Bond is exciting to me, you know, because they don't all use it. It's a little bit more expensive.
Yeah, and we could be having this conversation in a year from now, and it'll be all anybody's using. And I mean, you just never know with the technology. I know, right? You never know with the technology on when will it show up, and how long will it take to, you know, implement it, and how long will it be until everybody's using it? Because hey, this is the, you know, right way to go with the right solution. So, I also have, and I don't know, a lot of clients ask me, well, what's the most sustainable material to use for countertops? That's a question that we get a lot. So, and it kind of, with different people, for, you know, from our aspect, it's like, well, how much do you want to maintain it or not maintain it? You know, and how much is the granite countertop putting any radon into the air or not? And are you willing to, you know, put in the monitor to check and see what we've got in the air and air quality? So.
Yeah, that is, and the problem with any of this, and yours way more even than mine, I think, occupation, is just the complexity of it all. So when it comes to just something as simple as countertops, it isn't like cabinets that it has a whole bunch of chemicals and there can be metals and laminates and all these different adhesives. You know, countertop is relatively simplistic, but it depends. If that granite countertop was dug up out of the earth in China and put on, you know, a ship and brought over here and put into a hub and spoke distribution system where it goes into New York or goes into Boston and then shipped out to you, is that a good thing? I mean, just because in your home it's healthy, okay, if health is it, that's fine. And same thing with social justice. You can start taking a few steps away from environmentalism and get into other fields, but they're all, I think, related to the same kind of ethos, which is when you look at how we've conventionally made products that are based on performance and price, if you don't ask any other questions like health and social justice issues, you know, you start peeling back the, you know, curtain there and you go, ugh.
Yeah.
So, you know, rich light is a great material for countertops. What you do with it when you're done with it is an interesting question. But I love it as a countertop. And I'm not a laminate snob either. I mean, I hate to say that. Everyone's going to be like, laminate? But I mean, Pionite is made, in Auburn? And it's lightweight. So if you're looking for low carbon footprint, I can't diss it, you know?
Well, and for us, you know, it's so much more important to improve the building envelope and everything that, you know, I'm not a laminate snob either. Like, let me save you $5,000 here. And if you want to put in granite countertops in 2 years or 5 years, that's fantastic because they're super easy to change. But if we take $5,000 out of our building envelope budget, it's not easy to put that back in. Like, you know, you change your insulation strategy, you know, that's always going to, you know, every year that's going to come back and do it. So honestly, I'm not a laminate snob either. And they make some nice looking laminates these days, which, you know, most people would say, oh, your architect said
I know.
And I'm like, hey, you know what?
I know. I feel like it's heresy to say that. But when you press yourself for why is it heresy to say that, it's because marketing people told us it wasn't stylish.
Right?
I think if you're going to have a conversation about sustainability, and this is definitely taboo, but I'm, you know, I'm one of those people that I think I am sort of on the fringe on some of my viewpoints, that I might as well look like a kook, but that to have a conversation about sustainability, you can't ignore consumption,
right?
You know, I mean, I forget what the statistics are, but we represent a certain percentage of the population and a much larger percentage of consumed objects.
Yep.
And so much so that if the rest of the world behaved like we did, the planet would be a lifeless hunk of rock in 10 years,
right?
Because it's just not sustainable. And so, you know, when I think about that, I can't help but say, if the reason why you wouldn't buy something is simply because a marketing person told you it's not fashionable, then make sure you're thinking for yourself, you know? And I mean, within reason. If laminate's not for you, I'm not pushing laminate. I don't think I've sold a laminate countertop in a long time. But I also wouldn't look at someone and say, oh, you can't use laminate. You know, I wouldn't do that. It has its own story.
Well, and there's pluses and minuses to everything. And if you can hit it in 80%, then you're doing great. I mean, you're already well and above somebody who didn't even think about that, as part of it. And kitchens, I mean, I don't know what you've seen, but for us is, what's the lifespan of a kitchen?
Oh yeah.
A lot of the stuff that is coming back in that's popular. I mean, what a KitchenAid's releasing all of those appliance colors this year that are like circa the 60s, all of the, champagne colors and all of that. Well, everybody ripped all that stuff out and they were like, that's not cool. Nobody wants this anymore. And now everybody's like, I want to recreate that.
Right.
But in the reality is that, I mean, people redo their kitchens out every how many years. And so, what is the material and what is its lifespan afterwards? And, we used to have appliances that lasted 40 years and people would come and repair them and do all of that. Now we significantly more efficient appliances, but the lifespan of an appliance is 10 years. And so what are we doing with all of the appliances? Are we breaking them down? Are we recycling them? Are we using the pot? So it's always so challenging. It's like, we've improved the efficiency. We're spending, less in electricity. We've got better refrigeration. We've got all of that. But now it only lasts for 10 years instead of. So.
Oh, definitely. My first refrigerator came from my mother, and it was a Hot Point. It was a Hot Point that was ancient, but I bet you anything it's still running.
Probably.
Because it was a very simple model. But of course, I'm not saying, obviously it was a ridiculous energy suck.
Right.
But, and with appliances too, every appliance, that is my kitchen right over there, and every appliance in it is used.
Right.
And it's not as efficient, but as you said, and I do know there are metal scrappers who do take it, and it does have some kind of
life cycle afterward.
Yeah, it does. But it's not a cradle to cradle solution. It's not like great things are happening with all of this. And I do think it's important to create a market for used stuff. And unfortunately, it becomes sort of consumption and class. That's where consumption and class seem to intersect, and so that certain types of people have used appliances, and we have apartment buildings, so we've gotten very comfortable with where to find them, how to evaluate them, and to give them a life. And so I have all used appliances in my kitchen, and probably will for some time.
Yeah. I know, it's the same. We bought a house in December, and it's like we have all of these things, and sure, maybe it's not exactly what I would have picked if I was picking something new, but you know what? I'm not going to get rid of it until it honestly is just no more. So.
Yeah. Yes. And it's what's really important here as I think about all this is that I try to be open towards, I just did a kitchen with a brand new gorgeous range from France. And it's not that I'm preachy and saying, oh, you shouldn't do that. There is no, you shouldn't do that. I look at my job as to be an information source. Information should be used as a gift. It really should. And if you do a good job of presenting it, people will take it up and do what they will with it. So I just, when you ask me the story about kitchens and sustainability, I feel this moral imperative to talk about the fact that consumption is an element to it. And so, yeah.
And from my perspective, people are like, well, don't you design kitchens? And I was like, well, if somebody wanted me to design them a kitchen, I could. But really what we design is the space and the flow. And then we give it over to a great kitchen designer, which is why I love working with you, because honestly, you're going to know how to get every last square inch out of it, which is the reason why people hire architects, is they want to give you as much as they can within your budget and your time frame and your scope,
Right.
And it's the same, for us with a kitchen design, is I'm going to say, here, this is the amount of space that I have, and you're going to take that and run with it. And you're going to get the best out of it. And I think for me, that's sustainable just in its own nature, because you're going to be able to talk the client through every aspect of that kitchen and how it uses, and the bells and the whistles, and what you need and what you don't need, and space planning and thinking about all of those things. And, that doesn't always happen when you don't have a good kitchen designer. And so I always try to push people to go to somebody who really gets it, who knows what they're talking about. And for us, with our clients, wanting to do something just a little bit better, a little bit more sustainable, or they're concerned about the indoor air quality, or they're concerned about all of that, is, having a place where they can come where there are other options is fantastic. So.
Sure. And you, like a physician or someone who's repairing your car or doing your taxes, you do bring a body of knowledge that they don't have.
Right.
The trick is that you don't bring 100% of that body of knowledge, because there's this worldview that factors into it too. I mean, look at, everything we've been talking about is the fact that there are choices.
Right.
There's carbon footprint, there's local, there's, low VOC, and there isn't perfect solutions for anyone. And so that's the role that we play, is by bringing that to bear and saying, based on what you're telling me is important to you, it looks like this is a great choice for you.
Yeah, this is what and I think that's the best part, is being able to listen and hear what's super important to the client, and then being able to deliver on that. And in my mind, that is sustainable, because sustainability it really means something different to everybody. They want to use local labor and produce local jobs, and have something that's not being trucked from California or flown over from the overseas. And or there's other people who say, look, I have asthma, I need to really think about what goes into this product, and how we're going to handle any kind of off-gassing that it might have. And you're right, not everything that's the best product is going to be made locally. Like, wouldn't that be amazing? Not probably ever going to happen, but
right. Little micro manufacturing everywhere.
Right, exactly. Little mini farms of manufacturing. So, all right, we're almost to 30 minutes, and so I just wanted to recap. Is there anything else from the article you're in the checker out in the article in the latest issue of Green and Healthy Homes, or at Performance Building Supply to check out the different cabinetry lines and everything that you have? But is there anything else that you want to kind of impart your wisdom to sustainable kitchens, or what people should think about?
I think we've probably, cabinets, counters, and appliances are the three big items you put in there. So, and I think we've touched on it. There's plenty more we could always talk about at some point, but those are the biggies. And I think hopefully we've given people a lot to think about. Yeah,
I know. We could sit here and talk for days or weeks about every nuance or instance of what you can, but hopefully it's just a thought process to get people thinking that when you are out there and you're thinking about designing your kitchen or doing a renovation, or you're doing a net zero or net zero ready house, to think about kind of all the different aspects. So I appreciate you popping on the podcast today and talking with us a little bit more about that. So
thank you.
We'll check in with you again in a couple of months, see what else is new. How about that?
Awesome. That'd be awesome. Thank you.